Hi, I'm DM Gallibond. In last week at the table, we look at what happened in the three actual play games I run for my Twitch channel, which you can find over at twitch.tv/Gallibond. Now let's get on with the show. On Thursday nights, we're playing the Dragon of Icespire Peak Essentials game. The live sessions for this game air at 8 p.m. Eastern Time. We spent a few minutes allowing the players from last week to level up their characters and making sure that nobody had any questions about the process. Then we got on with the game after deciding that the two players who missed last week could level up if they performed something dramatic during the session. This is to try to help catch them up without simply giving them a free level for not playing. During the celebration at the Stonehill Inn, the party were approached by two NPCs who wanted to let them know about jobs for the Adventurers Guild. The first was eponymous Barthen from Barthen's Provisions. He informed them that there is a group of gnomes who live in an area called Gnomengard. They need to be warned about the dragon, and Barthen said that these gnomes are known for creating nifty magical items that may be helpful when the party eventually gets to face the dragon itself. He will pay each of the adventurers 50 gold pieces to go warn the gnomes about the dragon. And if the gnomes give them any magic items the party doesn't want, he'll buy each of those for another 50 gold pieces. Otherwise, they can keep any magic items the gnomes may give them if the party believes that they will be useful. The adventurers were naturally a bit skeptical. After being told there was nothing other than a midwife at the windmill and finding an angry manticore there, the party wondered what they might find when they go to rescue these gnomes. They made a number of skill checks, including some perception and insight checks, and eventually determined that Barthen just simply likes the gnomes and genuinely believes their magic items may help the party down the road. The second person to approach the party was Halia Thornton from the Phandalin Miners Exchange. She had news about some dwarf prospectors who were at an archaeological dig and whom she considers very good customers. She would greatly appreciate the party going to warn the miners about the dragon, and if they wish to return to Phandalin, she has a cart and a horse the PCs can rent very cheaply to help bring the dwarves supplies back. It's pretty clear Halia is very interested in keeping her good customers alive, and she'll pay each of the PCs 50 gold pieces to warn the prospectors about the dragon. The next morning the party procured some supplies for a journey of several days, rented a cart and the horse Allegra from Halia, and set out. In the middle of the afternoon they reached the archaeological dig site, which is in a box canyon. They met the two dwarven prospectors, who welcomed them with food and ale and told them about a problem they have encountered. They ran into some green slimes inside the temple they are trying to explore and clear out. If the party can deal with the green slimes, the prospectors will give them a pair of sending stones that they can keep. The party entered the main temple sanctuary area and they found two large green slimes. Between some good nature and history checks that helped them remember what not to do against green slimes, they were able to make enough ranged attacks and use appropriate spells to damage and immobilize these slimes. It turned out that when you ray of frost something that can only ooze 10 feet per round, you can effectively immobilize it, which was a great use for Abinadam's cantrips. The party was victorious, and everyone gained a level. This is where we ran out of time for the session. Next week we will pick up with the party exploring the rest of the area with the dwarves, getting a rest, and then heading off to warn gnomes. On Saturdays at noon Eastern Time, we are playing the History of D&D campaign. This is a homebrew game in a homebrew world using original D&D rules. Alright, to start this game, we had one of our players from last week create a new permanent character. Mark created a wizard character instead of continuing to play a dwarf character like he did last week with the pre-gen. The wizard character was able to use read magic to read the papers from the office and learned that the cult has spies in the Duke's Keep. Um, Also learned that there are several bases for the cult in this area. One is this moat house, another base is south of the Duke's Keep, and then there's a regional command bunker or lair somewhere nearby. And that bunker is apparently where Bargle is. So this confirms that Bargle is basically a lieutenant of sorts who oversees a regional force for the cult and who reports to higher and as yet unnamed authorities within the cult. So the heroes discovered a boatload of opulent treasure in Laris' personal chamber. They also learned about the limits of buying and selling by settlement size. Dedale is a village, which means that it can buy and sell items up to 200 gold pieces each. So they have to go to a larger town to find or to sell more expensive items. So the heroes returned to Dedale and were lauded by the town. Several, several minstrels were singing heroic songs and telling heroic tales of the party's deeds. Some of those were more accurate, and some of them were a bit more exaggerated. Dora set about to play matchmaker. She hoped to give all the heroes a chance to hook up with an adoring fan from the town sometime that evening. The village council met with the heroes and confirmed two things. First was an agreement for the moat house deed. This has been approved unanimously by the council. Now the real paperwork begins, which means that they have to get paperwork from the local nobility, the provincial government, and the imperial court, which all has to be processed and signed and filed and documented and cross-checked, and that will take several months to all happen. Several months of in-game time to all happen. So the second thing that the council wanted to discuss is news from Lareth's interrogation. Now this confirms that Bargle has a lair nearby, and the village council wants the party to scout it out. They will pay each adventurer 500 gold pieces to locate and surveil the place. If the party chooses to infiltrate and retrieve any evidence or prisoners from the location, that's great. If the party takes any loot, they can keep it as long as it's not stolen from someone who can be identified. Now, getting back to Dora, her own efforts and at matchmaking backfired a little bit for her. She followed a handsome blacksmith's apprentice out of the inn uh, and to the place where he was living. And the apprentice, of course, in a town like this, lives with the blacksmith and the blacksmith's goodwife. Now, this blacksmith's goodwife is a very proper woman who brooks no nonsense and is the complete master of her house, including her husband and the apprentice. So the good wife decided to make up a separate room for Dora and made it clear that there would be no funny business under her roof. In fact, she consigned the poor blacksmith's apprentice to the stable since they had to make an extra room for this sweet, heroic fighter that he brought home from the celebration. So the next day, the party sold their collected loot, at least the portions of the loot that can be sold in Dedale, and each player or each character got 172 gold pieces and some change out of the deal. So the party also identified the magic items that they had recovered. Those were +1 plate armor, a bracer of free action, which means that spells like hold person won't work on you, and a staff of striking, which is basically a staff that hits with extra magical energy every time you whack somebody with it. So before going to find Bargle's lair, the party decided that they should go and deal with the monster in the well at the moat house. Now the monster turned out to actually be three monsters, three enormous giant crayfish. They crushed both Omu and Siren with single attacks. So Dora and the wizard dragged Omu and Siren out of the well, and they will survive. But we ran out of time for the session, and we left it there, and we will resume next week. Now, on Sunday afternoons at 2:30 p.m. Eastern Time, we play a 5th edition game called The Walker of Waterdeep. And in this week's session of Walker of Waterdeep, we buttoned up the fight at Hrakamar. We made a trek to the Wormheart Mine, and we had a big fight. Oh, and someone got a shiny as well. So the team started by reviewing the contracts between the Devils and the Githyanki in Hrakamar. Now those are written in common, and the contract stipulated everything from production quotas for the forge to slave populations to be supplied by the Githyanki to the number of human and dwarf slaves it is acceptable for the devils to torture and turn into their thralls, as well as the number of human and dwarf slaves that are acceptable to be fed to the fire newt slaves. So the heroes also discovered some metallurgical formulas that are written in Githyanki. Nobody can read Githyanki, and even if they could, the level of metallurgy required to understand the alloys, components, and devices that are being assembled and specified is beyond anything that a mere 5th level Forge Cleric could understand. Now, after a rest, Barak Clanghammer led the heroes on a tour of the place, and they found a number of human and dwarf slaves. From the group, some of the group started tending to the needs of the slaves, who appeared exhausted, malnourished, and near death. Meanwhile, Barak and Adamant went to inspect the rest of the Rakamar area. They found that a single blast of the dragon's fire breath fixed the issue of the smoke-filled caverns, and that the fire newts had built a shrine to Imix, complete with an idol of the elemental fire god some 5 feet tall. Then Barak went to collect Thardrum, saying there was something he wanted to show the dwarf. The two crossed to a pair of golden dwarf statues that looked scratched but otherwise unharmed, and the statues were guarding a vault door. Thardrum noticed runes over the door and next to the door that read beginnings and endings in an ancient dwarven script. Then Barak went to each of the statues and whispered an ancient dwarven passphrase. To the statue on the left, he said, "Open in friendship." To the statue on the right, he said, "Rest from guarding." And with those words spoken, the door beyond the statues opened. Beyond was a storeroom. It had some old crates and ingots and other detritus inside. Most of it was unremarkable, except for a golden gauntlet that sat on a crate. Barak told Thardrum a myth of dwarven mystics about a gauntlet that was stolen from Moradin when he rested from his labors at the Forge of Creation. Legend says that in ancient times, dwarfs of a fallen civilization found that gauntlet and brought it here to Chult, and it has been in Hrakamar ever since. Now this gauntlet is the first scaling item that I am revealing to the party. This game crosses the streams between Magic the Gathering and D&D, and this item is based on the Gauntlet of Power card from the Masterpiece series Kaladesh Inventions release. In Magic, this is a 5 casting cost or colorless artifact, and it boosts the power and toughness of all creatures in the game that are of a color the player declares upon putting the card into play. Now, this card also means that all lands producing a color specified by the player produce extra mana of that extra mana of that color every time they're tapped. So Thardrum is a dwarf and a ranger with the Horizon Walker template. Now, as I've been figuring out these scaling items, I try to create an item that feels thematically consistent with the card in Magic the Gathering and also matches the class and build of the PC who receives it. In this case, the gauntlet provides some utility features, some defensive bonuses against different energy types that the player can select after a short or long rest, and eventually at higher tiers it will also provide some offensive bonuses using different energy types that the player can choose during encounters. As for introducing the item now, there's an artwork item listed in the Tomb of Annihilation adventure in the Hrakamar Forge called Moradin's Gauntlet. In that adventure, it's merely a decorative piece that is valuable to dwarven collectors. But I decided it should really be an artifact, and so I judged it would be a great item for the dwarf ranger in the party. I should mention here that Thardrum's player has always had the notion that Thardrum is a very humble dwarf, and he's playing that very well. At the moment, he's been a bit overwhelmed by this item, even when it was presented to him by a creature he knows is a gold dragon in polymorph form. So even though he realizes it could be a powerful item, for the time being he has thrown the gauntlet into his backpack and he's carrying it around until he finds an in-game reason that Thardrum would come to accept and perhaps really does deserve to have this item. So after finishing business in Hrakamar, the party decided to head to Wormheart Mine. The mine is about 40 miles away in tunnels that have ore cart tracks laid in them. Instead of hand-waving the journey or loading it with battle encounters, I decided to turn it into a series of skills challenges. I created 5 mini skills challenges, each with a best of 5 structure, and if the party won a challenge, they would get a bonus. If they lost a challenge, they would suffer a penalty. So the skills challenges included Fire Newt Lunch Break, which is save slaves from becoming lunch for some hungry fire newts. Githyanki Patrol 1, which is to elude or slay a party of Githyanki warriors on patrol. Kuthric Hive Hatching, evade or kill a number of Kuthric hatchlings and a Hive Lord. Githyanki Patrol 2, elude or slay a party of Githyanki warriors on patrol. And Outer Perimeter Sentries, which is elude or kill the sentries on the outer perimeter of Wormheart Mine. So the party won 4 out of 5 of the skills challenges. In fact, they won the first 4, which gave them the following bonuses. For Fire Newt Lunch Break, they gained +1 on their initiative in the battle for Wormheart Mine. Now, losing that challenge would have meant expending a hit die that could be used to recover hit points during a short rest. Then Githyanki Patrol 1 happened. Because they won, they lowered the DC by 2 on the Githyanki Patrol 2 challenge. And losing would have meant expending yet another hit die that could be used to recover hit points in a short rest. And Kuthric Hive Hatching. Winning this gave them a +1 on their initiative in the battle for Wormheart Mine. Now, losing would have meant setting their current HP to their bloodied value, which is half of their HP total. Then after this challenge, I built in a short rest where the PCs can use their remaining hit dice to recover lost hit points. So now you see that's where that penalty of losing hit dice at the beginning could hurt, because if you lost the first 3, you would be sitting at half hit points, and then you wouldn't have 2 of your hit dice to be able to try to recover hit points. So you would have to spend things like potions or spend spell slots or do things like that to get back up to full health. And that was the whole point, is that why these skill challenges are there is either to reward the players when they win with some bonuses or to penalize them by taking some resources away that they're going to need in the upcoming fight. Uh, the fourth challenge is Githyanki Patrol 2, and for winning that, they lowered the DC by 2 on the Outer Perimeter Sentries challenge. Losing would have meant adding 2 to the DC for the Outer Perimeter Sentries challenge. And the only challenge that they lost was indeed that Outer Perimeter Sentries challenge, even though they had an easier DC on it. This meant that they each lost 6 hit points from their total. Had they beaten the challenge, they would have received an additional +1 on the initiative for the Battle of Wormheart Mine. So the session ended with an epic battle. After our break, we fought the battle for Wormheart Mine. This pitted the party against a force of 10 Githyanki. 5 warriors, 3 knights, 1 Gish, and 1 Githyanki Hungerer. Now the Hungerer is a reskinned and slightly modified Shatterkai Soulmonger. I modified some of the abilities and swapped out some others. For instance, I toned down the 10d8 Chain Lightning and the 10d8 Wave of Weariness to be 5d8 each. And I swapped out the Finger of Death spell for the Dimension Door spell to be in line with other fairly powerful Githyanki. I also had a separate battle planned and even already plotted out with what would happen round by round, and that's the battle between the dragons. Now, in this version of the Forgotten Realms in my game, Aranax, which is the dragon name for Barak Clanghammer, had been a longtime friend and an ally of the albino dwarves in Chult, and somewhere even further in his past, he had made an ancient pact with a former Open Lord of Waterdeep to answer a summons when called by the Dragonstaff. So some years prior to our game, Lord Dagult Neverember had invoked the pact and had summoned Aranax back to Waterdeep, and then had forced Aranax by the terms of that binding oath to play guard dog for the 500,000 gold pieces that Lord Dagult had embezzled. Now, this was all before the events of the published 5th edition adventures. So Oranax had been stuck in Waterdeep while Zendalor the Red Dragon had killed many of the albino dwarves and taken the hoard in Wormheart Mine that Oranax had claimed for his own. And nothing burns the soul of a dragon like treasure being stolen from him. So this arc was a nice way of getting Oranax back to Chult and out of the campaign, and also a way of lulling the party into a false sense of security that they have a powerful ally for a coming big fight. But when Zendalor fled to the skies above the jungle, Aranax gave chase, and this left the PCs to battle the Githyanki alone. Now, the Githyanki Hungerer, or I should say the Shatterkai Soulmonger, has a spell called Seeming, which allows him to put an illusion that lasts for 8 hours and isn't broken by attacking onto as many of his allies as he can see. So the Seeming spell had all of the Githyanki disguised as human slaves, and they were mixed in with actual human slaves. So when the party got close, but not too close, the Hungerer opened his attack with a Wave of Weariness. That knocked a couple of PCs down to half health, and it imposed a level of exhaustion on them. Now the other thing that Wave of Weariness does is it gives the Hungerer half of the hit points of any creature that dies from any of its abilities. So that huge wave of weariness also killed 10 slaves, which are commoners, have 4 hit points each. So by killing those 10 slaves, the Githyanki Hunter gave himself 20 temporary hit points on top of his existing hit point total. So he, in one fell swoop, he crippled some members of the party, and he made himself a little bit tougher and harder to kill. Then later on, between a chain lightning spell that the Hungerer also had, and a fireball that the Githyanki Gish had, several of the PCs actually dropped to 0 hit points before the cleric could get any healing going. So time started running out on our session, and when I saw how the battle was going, I decided to send in the cavalry. When I was putting this encounter together, I was concerned that the encounter might be a little overpowered. Yeah, I know it sounds like a lot to throw 10 Githyanki against 5 PCs, but they have they really work well together, and they really mopped up uh, a lot of encounters that should be a difficult challenge and even deadly encounters for them. So I just wanted to make this feel like an epic fight, so I just got to a point where it was a deadly encounter, and I said, okay, I'm just going to add a few more monsters in there for good measure and see what happens. But since since the encounter might be overpowered, I had staged a large number of albino dwarves from surrounding villages uh, outside where nobody could see them. Now, the story point I put in there is that the oracles of these dwarves had been led to believe in dreams that a sign would come that they should retake the Wormheart Mine that was uh, the place where their ancestors had lived and worked. So when they saw the great gold dragon fly up out of the mine to fight the red dragon in the skies above, they took that to be the sign they had been looking for. And so about 45 dwarves rappelled down into the mine shaft and started overpowering the Githyanki by sheer force of numbers. The Githyanki warriors were all defeated quickly, and the higher level Githyanki got to half hit points, and then they used their Dimension Door spells to escape the battle. Now, what this does is it keeps the Githyanki in play as future villains for the party to meet again, and it also lets us end the session mostly on time. So next week we will not have a game in Walker of Waterdeep because it's Super Bowl Sunday. So we'll pick up with the aftermath of the battle in the mine on February 9th, and that's going to be last week from the table for Tuesday, January 28th, 2020. So everybody go ahead and help your games be memorable, and always try to have a tale that you can share from your table. Good night.